If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to part 3 of the Apostolic United Brethren series with Kristen Decker. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and in this part we will be continuing to explore Kristen's adulthood in forced polygamy. Please note that this series contains themes of child abuse and should be listened to with discretion. Now, on to part 3 of the AUB series with Kristen Decker, one of my personal heroes. You mentioned at the very start a conversation that you had with your father when you said Apostolic United Brethren. Why the brethren? Why not all of the sisters? So these stages that you've gone through, accepting your husband was going to enter into a plural marriage, you would be a sister wife, you live in a house with all of the children, you go through all of these difficult experiences. And then you go to these therapy sessions, and then you have this conversation with your father where you're like, I am thinking of leaving. Talk us through that whole process, how all of that happened, and your thought process and how it played out.
My leaving, I left, and I don't know that it's really clear. I've realized that in my book, that I left the religion before I left my husband, quite a while before. And I've gone back in my journals and, a lot of things happening, and realized that I was probably really, really leaving and figuring it out and finding myself and discovering me, which was such a incredibly fun, exciting, and crazy and sad and all these things, because I had to ditch everything I grew up with, let go of everything, the foundation, the belief system. Everything was different. It was freaking scary and yet very exciting at the same time. And the best part was that I mentioned I had this therapist that helped me through it. My daughter was in trouble, and she had to go before a judge, and I was standing there with her, and he told her she had to stay. She had house arrest, and she had this and that and the other, and then she had to see a therapist. And I think that he told her that she had this therapist for 3 months, and I was standing right next to her, and he looks at me and he says, you too, you have therapy too. And I can't remember if there was a time limit on for me that he said. And I remember inside I'm rebelling. I'm going, hey, you don't have any jurisdiction over me. My daughter's the one that you're supposed to be addressing, not me. But then there's, at the same time, I'm going, wow, maybe that's another chance to really have somebody on the outside to talk to more so. Meanwhile, I was going to OA, Overeaters Anonymous. I was meeting people on the outside. I was going to school with my youngest and volunteering a lot more in my class. I'd always done that, but I was volunteering in my children's classrooms. They went to private schools off and on, which we didn't talk a lot about, but probably don't need to. And anyway, my youngest son was in Head Start, and I volunteered there, and I became a assistant teacher. I was hired as an assistant teacher in Head Start, and I loved it. Loved, always wanted to be a teacher. Loved kids. So my daughter was about 14 when all this happened. My youngest would have been, 8-ish. And he sends me to therapy, and I'm like, okay, I'll go, And so we talked with my daughter, and she got hers done and ditched. She was like, I'm fine now, I'm out of here. And I stayed with this therapist for, I think, a good 1.5 to 2 years while she helped me figure out who in the hell is Kristen and what will really make her happy. And so that was really, really the beginning, I think, of my gaining self-esteem and forgiving myself for all the crazy belief system, for, all the mistakes and whatever else, forgiving my mom, forgiving a lot of people, and moving forward and moving on. But the bottom line is I still love my husband. I always did. And even though we had our fights and disagreements and whatever, so for a long time I was trying to figure out how to stay, and because we'd also created this family together, and how will I stay in this relationship? And there's families that I know that are doing that still. They're struggling with that. We don't believe in it anymore, but we've created this family together. So can we make it work or not? And I was trying really hard to do that, and it was becoming more and more difficult, because now my sister wife isn't a sister wife anymore. She's the other woman, the mistress, and then the jealousy didn't make any more sense anymore, because this isn't a religious reason to put up with this. And I was going through all these things, and then, long story short, my husband starts dating. They lied about it, that they were just friends, but that's in my book. This other girl who one of the girls I told you about when they were younger, that he had a crush on, and vice versa, big time. And they claim they're friends, but she starts running the show, and it was just insanity.
If it's for religious reasons and they're still feeling the need to lie about their intentions or the situation, that kind of tells you everything, doesn't it?
And now it's not religious, but they were trying to, and I'm really jumping ahead, because I had left the belief system, and he had been out of the belief system for a long time. He really had become inactive in almost any way, in every way, in everything. And he always did rebel about that. I think I told you, independent. All he has to do is be a polygamist. He doesn't have to do anything else. And it wasn't about church or religion or anything. And so I don't even know how, there was so much that happened, but I decided to go to school. And I'm going to back up about why the final part for me religiously was, I was already ditching the belief system. I was listening to tapes and reading books I shouldn't have. That's why you're not supposed to get educated, And Carolyn Myss said, just drop everything, let go of everything you were ever told to believe, and don't do this anymore. Just find yourself. And so I was doing that. And meanwhile, the men that I told you that gave me the creeps, did we even talk about that? Oh my gosh, the whole time in my childhood, they gave me the creeps. These men on the priesthood council. And every time I'd tell mom and dad I hated to go to church, I didn't want to listen to them. They made me sick. They'd be around me, and they just haunted me. And it comes out later on, in years after I'd become inactive, that their kids, their daughters, and some of the boys finally did say that they'd been molested all these years. Other women came forward, talked about that happening. And these are the men that I told my parents I couldn't stand. And they, what they'd always tell me is, well, these men were called of God, and you just need to pray more and fast and get your testimony, and because they're on the council and blah. And so therefore, once again, I'm wrong. I'm the one that's the bad kid. I'm not doing what's supposed to be right. So it comes out that they were excommunicated. And for me, I was already pretty much out the door. I mean, gone, but that was the final straw. And it was like, I am so not in anymore ever. But I was taking care of my mom, who had dementia. My sister-in-law and I and a few other of the kids were taking turns going over and taking care of her. And so I was there, and Dad's office was there, and my mother's in his house, but in her part of the house was the front room that he turned into his office. And so he saw me there a lot, and he thought I was still active, and he knew I was taking good care of Mom. But whenever I'd go talk to Mom, now Mom had short-term memory loss, but this is when he started calling me the troublemaker. I would talk to Mom about my issues, about these sexual abuse, about these men, about all this stuff. And I wrote in my book about one time when my mother talked about her father and how abusive he was. Mom would get all upset every time I talked to her, but what I was really trying to do is give her a way to heal herself, because I know she was miserable. She was still miserable. Uh, that's a whole nother life that she lived. Didn't know who she was ever. She just conformed and became that martyr person. So I would talk to Mom about a lot of things. And I remember one day saying, Mom, what do you think it means in your scriptures where it says, love thy neighbor as yourself, or however that goes? And Mom says, well, that means you're supposed to love your neighbors. And I said, as you love yourself. I said, how can you possibly love people and love others if you don't even love yourself? Because I knew Mom's self-esteem was still sucky, even at 75, 80, whatever. And she sat there and she started crying. She goes, I never even thought about that. If you don't put yourself first, because we were always last, and she was the one taught me, absolutely never will you put yourself first. And I brought things up to her like that, and she'd go, you're right. And so then she might bring something up to Dad, or he happened to walk in and Mom would be upset or crying or whatever. Oh my gosh, here's my troublemaker. And you're just getting your mother all upset. And then I have to deal with her. And so I said to Dad, I said, well, you know what, Dad, you should have had to deal with Mom a long, 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 long time ago. And you should never have shut her down, because Dad would say, that's all in the past. Stop bringing that up. That's all blah, 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 And then one day when he called me, I walked in the house and he goes, oh, here's my troublemaker again. And I said, Dad, I got this smile on my face. The best part is I have a name. You finally remember who I am. Because he had so many kids and people and everything, he didn't even know who was who anymore. And I knew he knew I was one of the daughters, but but now at least I got a name and I loved it. I said, I love that. I really love that, Dad. That's really cool. He'd always just roll his eyes at me. It was fun. Quiet torment.
At the point where you realize that there's no way to salvage the marriage that you're in, how does that look in terms of moving away from that environment and rebuilding your life completely outside of something that you've been immersed in since the day you were born?
It really was. It was the same as discovering myself. It was very exciting and major empowering, and at the same time pretty scary. The best part of all of this, Casey, is that I had my precious therapist who had for a year and a half or whatever it was, stepped me through. One of the things she said when we ended the sessions, and I'll never forget it, is, I wish I could remember her words verbatim, but she said, the nicest part is that now you can leave in a healthy way instead of leaving in unhealth, which is what so many, many, many people do. They haven't had the chance to discover. Then they leave, and so many of the young boys and girls and people that I work with, they're out of the frying pan in a fire, into that, however you say that, and they have no clue. All of a sudden they're in hell, and then are in heaven, they believe, and then they're thrown into hell. And that is probably the best gift the universe gave me, was having that opportunity. That the judge, I have no clue why he said it, but it was meant to be, because she was probably the best mental health I've ever had in my whole life. So when I'm leaving, by now I'm working, I'm going to school. Actually, I don't think I'd started school yet. I can't remember timing wise, but I'm finding myself. I've got a job. I've got friends on the outside. And the best part, and I've heard this 1,000 times, I am so excited to tell all of you in the audience, the best part is that those of us who leave, everybody lies about all of you, like you're all horrible, wicked, terrible people, evil, and you're going to kill us and rape us and steal our things and, send us straight to hell. And the best thing for me was I was going, oh my gosh, I like these people better than even the people I know, even better than my family and my relatives and everybody. That was, oh my gosh, so awesome. And my friends I was making were more loyal, were more honest to the max. I mean, brutally honest. And I'm going, oh, I'm not used to that. You don't talk about how you feel. You don't get mad. You don't get sad. You don't cry. Oh my gosh, you can't do that. I mean, it was like, I'll never forget sitting in an OA meeting where these women are talking about real feelings, really talking. And you just don't get to do that. You have to keep sweet, pray, and obey, right? And I am blown away. I'm like totally blown away by it. It gets my turn and they asked if I wanted to say anything. And I thought, I think that I can't remember what I said, but I remember just saying at the very end, I think I need to go home and eat a batch of cookies. I'm not used to all this stuff. I don't even know what to do with it. It was so funny. It was mind-boggling how people were real and true and honest and friendships. And even to this day, I say that I have a lot of family. I love them to pieces. I love my relatives, but I don't like most of them because they can't be. I was in that same situation. We don't even know who you're talking to. You're just some zombie that was told to do and raise and be this way and believe this way. So I love the real connections I've made, and that as I'm realizing how free I am. And I married some dork in between time, and that was really crazy making, but it was worth every bit of that because I found myself even more what I would and wouldn't put up with, abuses and different things like that. Then I met this most awesome man in the whole wide world who recently passed away. The love of my life. I got my teaching degree, and I was teaching at the school where his daughter was working as a cook. And she said we needed to meet. And I had divorced from the second marriage, and I told Jody, no way in hell, I'm happy. No man in my life. I'm just finally happy. And she kept pushing it, and we met. And I think he was the best man in the whole world. And we just had 15 and a half wonderful years together. And he helped me with he not only helped, but he encouraged me in every direction in writing my book, in starting the Sound Choices Coalition, in advocacy work, in traveling, in speaking. He was just there in every way. He actually spoiled me. I used to know how to fix cars and change tires and do everything because we ex-polygamous wives are strong, not because of polygamy, but in spite of polygamy. I get to take that from Carolyn Pearson. And anyway, I did so much on my own and everything, but he'd get the gas in the car and do all these fantastic things. And he was just so absolutely amazing. At first he was my protector. He'd go on these talks because there were some threats. I wasn't really afraid. I'd lived my whole life in fear, which we didn't talk about that part, but of doomsday, the world coming to an end and the government's after us and all that bull crap. But I had some people threaten me over, mostly through email or text or different things like that, and or notes. But I didn't even know where to go with him, but he was there with me, with the victims, every time he could be. He would be there. And what can we do now? And how can I help? And do we need to go bring him food? What should we do next? And not only in my teaching with the children, but it was always, now what projects are we going to do tonight, honey? We're making posters or grading papers or whatever it was. He's my partner in everything and in every way. We just had this incredible, he loves my kids, and they love him, the grandkids, and vice versa. It's really been a wonderful life with him.
This third husband that you met, he was the person to make you a priority. You were the most important thing in his life, and you didn't have to fight for anything with him. He was there with you to go into fights for other people, and you really did get the opportunity to experience what it feels like to be the most important thing to somebody else unconditionally.
Yeah, and I felt that completely. And another thing that was so awesome is that I had that opportunity to love him too. And it was like there were no game playing, no one up or anything. He knew that I loved him. I don't even know explain that on the other side of that. So if, let's say, in a plural marriage, if I did something special for my husband, then he thinks his first thought's going to be, oh, that's just to win favor over the other wife, or over, oh, there's always questions, which we didn't talk about, the guys, their drama and their stress and their, I'll just really quick say about my brother. He's 2 years older than me, and he had three wives, and they were all fairly close to the same age. And he describes his life in polygamy as hell, really terrible hell. He was also suicidal. He believed he was supposed to do it, and he felt like a failure every day of his life. He had 17 children. He couldn't support them all and without working 24/7. And then, of course, he didn't have time with them. And he said that when he left one wife, he knew he was breaking her heart to go stay with another one. And they would fight, and they were jealous, and he knew that that they were, and that was heartbreaking to him. He said, I was breaking their hearts every day by doing what we believed in. And he felt like I did, like a complete failure. And he wanted to be good. He wanted to be a good man, what he believed was God's will. And he said, I was failing so miserably at making them happy, or keeping them happy, or having spending time with my kids, or in any success. And he said, I felt like a complete fraud when I'd go to church. Like, here everybody says, keep sweet, same for them. My family's also, and you sit in church and everybody's smiling, happy, putting on this big front when everybody's heart's broken and they're dying inside. So his example and his message is, just one of hundreds of men who go through a lot of similar crazy, horrible things as well. And my husband, back to him, he said one time, I jokingly said when we were first together, I said, if you ever want to be a polygamist, then you're not going to have me. I'll never do that again. And I knew he wasn't going. I just said it to him to see what he'd say. And he said, I will never do that, because that would turn me into an asshole. He said, it turns good men into assholes. And I hope that's okay to say on your program. But we've seen that where men can't do it either. It makes them crazy. They're insane. I mean, they might be a good man, then they turn in because they're trying to do something that's uncalled for. It's not natural. It's crazy. Yeah.
Did you ever worry, if you were to stay in the plural marriage arrangement that you were living in, whether any of your male children would become part of the kind of collateral of plural marriage that is the lost boys?
Absolutely. When I didn't worry so much about my boys as my girls, and the reason is because they were all leaving before I did. I always worried about them staying in it and going through all that, and the girls and the boys. I didn't want them to do it any more than I wanted to, like when I was younger. But we have to do this. So for the longest time, I was believing that bull crap. And then as I was getting older and watching my kids get older and more heartaches all around me, I stopped believing. And I just thought, oh, I hope they don't stay. In fact, there's this really cute little darling girl when my book first came out, and I was at a market selling them, and she comes cut by, and I hadn't seen her for a long time, and she had spaghetti straps. And I ran up and gave her a hug and I said, "You're out, you're out, you're out," because she had left the AUB. And we just hugged each other because we hadn't seen each other for so many years. And she said, "Yeah, I left." And she said, I was just too vain to stay. When they started telling us we couldn't wear makeup and we couldn't have our ears pierced and we couldn't dye our hair. She said, "That's what sent me away. Is I'm just too vain. I had to, be dressy and classy." Now she was a first wife, a convert, by the way. And so she wasn't putting up with a lot of that crap anyway, too. But I said to her, I wanted to tell you to run for your life. I mean, run when you got converted and were marrying your husband. It was all I could do to not tell you. She goes, "Well, why didn't you?" And I said, "Because I believed in it. I thought that we have to be miserably happy. Run, don't stay or you're going to be miserable." At the time, I thought that's what we had to do. And how sad is that? And not that she would have listened to me to run, but oh, yeah. There are so many people that came. I wanted to say, "Oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for you."
That is the end of part 3 of the AUB series with Kristen Decker. Part 4, which is the final part of this series, will look at Kristen's escape and recovery. To find a link to Kristen's book, 50 Years in Polygamy, please follow the links in the episode description. To get early access to ad-free full-length episodes, please visit patreon.com/thecultvault. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.